Good morning, colleagues. Commissioner Wojciechowski is also ready to start.
Będę pierwszy, czy jak to będzie?
A very warm good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished colleagues, distinguished participants. I would like to welcome all of you to this opening session of the expert consultation workshop on EU actions for pollinators in agricultural landscapes. Welcome and a very warm good morning. My name is Helmut Gaugic. I'm working at the Environment Agency Austria. I'm head of scientific management focusing on biodiversity at this agency, and it is my sincere pleasure and also my honor to moderate the workshop this morning. This workshop is part of a broader consultation being undertaken by the European Commission that collects stakeholder views and proposals in the context of the revision of the EU Pollinators initiative. This initiative is the first ever EU action framework to tackle the decline of wild pollinators and was adopted in June 2018. This workshop is organized by the consortium consisting of the Environment Agency Austria, the agency where I'm working at, and Pensoft publishers from Bulgaria on behalf of the European Commission. The workshop is comprised of two parts. First, and now, an introductory session open to the general public, which will present and discuss the policy landscape and views of stakeholders and member states on how the future common agricultural policy should be shaped to protect and promote pollinators in agricultural land. And second, a closed session in which selected experts will work on concrete proposals for policy actions to shape a pollinator-friendly agriculture in Europe. Due to its interactive nature, participation in this second session is by invitation only. Very briefly, technical information from my side for this first session, which is now open to the public. We are using a webinar tool called MS Teams Webinar. This is one you have been accessing, and all participants are muted. The webinar will be recorded, uploaded on the YouTube channel of the EU Pollinator Week, and then embedded in the EU Pollinator Week website. For questions and comments during this session, please use the chat function. There will be short question and answer sessions during which we will share questions in the chat with the speakers. For questions in the chat, please state clearly who are you directing the question to, who you want, in fact, the question to answer. That will be important so that we can direct the question to the speaker. All PowerPoint presentations and materials produced during this opening session will be made available to participants at the website of the EU Pollinator Week, which is www.pollinatorweek.eu. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker of this opening session, which will be Commissioner Janusz Wojciechowski. A warm welcome to you, Commissioner. We are glad that you are here, and we are glad that you will provide us with the first keynote address. Mr. Janusz Wojciechowski is European Commissioner for Agriculture. He has been in this position since 2019. He is a former judge at the High Court of Justice and has occupied several roles related to legislative affairs and audit including as a member of the European Court of Auditors. Between 2014 and 2016, he was a member of the European Parliament. Commissioner Wojciechowski, we are honored that you are here and we are looking forward to your keynote presentation. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, honorable members of the European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for the kind invitation. I'm very honored to be here, and I want to congratulate the organizers to put this program together and to raise the awareness of this immensely important topic of pollination. Pollinators, although very small in size, play a vital role in all our lives. European Union farmland provides essential habitats and landscapes for many pollinator species. Our farmers play already a vital role in preserving the European Union's biodiversity. This is why it is important to work with farmers to support their transition to a more environmental friendly farming practice, while at the same time ensuring that their farms remains economically viable. For some time now, we observe that pollinators are facing pressures. The main drivers of pollinators decline are multiply and include land use change, intensive agricultural management, including pesticides use, climate change, and invasive alien species. I'm very much committed to the protection of pollinators. They are essential for agricultural production and food security. Their decline must be reversed. We need to step our efforts regarding to loss of habitats, the impact of pesticides, the safeguarding of agrobiodiversity, and promotion of pollinators-friendly practices. The Commission has, with its European Green Deal and its biodiversity and farm-to-fork strategies, and the Commission strategy for carbon neutral Europe in 2050, presented its vision for a more sustainable farming future. With that, the Commission has set ambitious targets concerning landscape features, pesticides reduction levels, nutrient losses, organic farming and agroecological practices to reach carbon neutrality and preserve biodiversity. All this will help pollinators. The reform of the Common Agricultural Policy, agreed in June, is a step in the right direction. The new policy will address many challenges concerning the environment, but will also support farmers facing today's challenges and mitigate the pressures. The new Common Agricultural Policy will be greener, fairer, and more effective in delivering results for the environment, our farmers and citizens. The new Common Agricultural Policy will focus on all dimensions of sustainability. The reformed Common Agricultural Policy will meet higher environmental and climate ambition. Especially, it will contribute to the protection and restoration of biodiversity that will be beneficial to pollinators in agricultural land. Ladies and gentlemen, the green architecture of the Common Agricultural Policy will provide member states with more tools to pursue the ambitious environmental and climate-related objectives, such as enhanced conditionality, eco-schemes, and as well as environmental and climate management commitments. A concrete example for this is GAEC 9, which is a conditionality to have minimum share of at least 4% of arable land at farm level devoted to non-productive features or areas. The eco schemes are of particular importance because they are targeted funding to promote farming activities towards more agricultural practices beneficial, for example, biodiversity. An example here could be to fund the introduction of melliferous plants and maintenance of high nature value farming. The share of the direct payments envelope that member states must dedicate to eco schemes is significant and has been set at 25%. This effectively guarantees funds for the environment, biodiversity, and climate action. The final compromise of the Common Agricultural Strategic Plan regulation includes an impact indicator of pollinators, that's so-called enhancing biodiversity protection. The percentage of species and habitats of community interest related to agriculture with stable or increasing trends will be the basis for this indicator. The entire common agricultural policy must make an effective and efficient contribution to overall sustainability, environmental, economic, and social. We must strengthen agroecosystems, increase agroecology and agroforestry and other biodiversity-friendly production systems, such as organic farming, precision agriculture, facilitate biological pest control and climate adaptation, which will cut down on production cost and be beneficial for pollinators. In addition, in the field of research and innovation, one of the priorities is to find alternatives to use of chemical pesticides. The European Union Pollinators Initiative, which the Commission has launched in 2018, allowed us to draw up guidelines for managing authorities, farmers, and their advisors on how to increase the effectiveness of CAP measures for pollinators. Looking at some facts, we can observe that 12% of semi-natural habitats dependent on agriculture are assessed as being in good status in period 2013-2018. 8% of agricultural land is farmed organically. 11% of agricultural land was located in Natura 2000 areas. In 2025, about 80.8% of EU farmland will be covered by area-related payments linked with requirement for management practices to have a proven positive impact on biodiversity concerning such practices. A total European Rural Development Fund amount of around 56 billion euro will be spent for restoring, preserving, and enhancing ecosystems, which accounts for 46% of rural development funds for this programming period. Despite all of these efforts, we have to do more. I believe that the new common agricultural policy can lead the agricultural sector and food supply chain onto a more sustainable path. An increased focus on sustainable production will be positive for biodiversity and pollinators. Thank you very much again for invitation. I wish you all a good conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Wojciechowski, for this very relevant keynote address. Thanks for addressing the opening session of this workshop. Thank you for highlighting the importance of pollinators and putting the important subject of pollinators in the context of the Common Agricultural Policy and the CAP strategic plans. That is highly appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
We now move on, and as you all know, the Republic of Slovenia currently holds the presidency of the European Union, and that is why I'm extremely pleased and honored to now announce our next keynote speaker, who will be Mr. Aleš Irgolić, State Secretary at the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Food in the Republic of Slovenia. Mr. Irgolić was appointed Secretary of State within the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Food of the Republic of Slovenia in March 2021. Previously, he was head of the direct payment sector of the Agency for Agricultural Markets and Rural Development and dealt with the implementation of the Common Agricultural Policy. Mr. State Secretary Irgolić, we are honored and pleased that you are with us this morning, and we are looking forward to your keynote address. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it it is a privilege to be here with you today in this estimate panel company and be able to address you as such an important topic for agriculture as pollinators are. I would like to thank the European Parliament, MIP Hojsik and his team, the European Commission, WeLive, European Food Safety Authority, my colleague in the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Food, and all others that have put their efforts into making this event possible. Pollinators are vital for safe, stable, and sustainable food chains. We need to start building the future of agriculture on better and more solid foundations to be able to ensure safety and sustainability of global food systems. As our minister pointed out yesterday at the high-level conference, a new EU deal for pollinators is essential for ensuring that this perspective to be able to ensure it, we must take into account all three aspects of sustainable development: the economic, social, and environmental aspect. When we are talking about farming and food production, pollination is the essential ecosystem service provided by pollinators, without which the system cannot function. But not the only one. Pollinators provide also the essential, direct and indirect ecosystem services such as pest control, maintaining soil and water quality, prevent soil erosion, increase carbon sequestration, and landscape aesthetics. All of these ecosystem services are vital for agriculture. Pollinators play a crucial role in healthy and resilient ecosystems, and thriving pollinator population are essential to underpin the stability of pollinator services in the future. When we are speaking about pollinators, we do not talk only about honeybees, but also wild bees, wasps, hoverflies, butterflies, moths, beetles, bats, and birds, which greatly contribute to increasing the quantity and quality of food. In a world where farmers have to adapt to the impacts of climate change, the spread of pests and diseases of croplands and of honeybees, it is ever more important that we mention and much species diversity as possible in natural vegetation and wild pollinators. Why we may need on their genetic reserves and pollinator services in the future. That is why transition to pollinator-friendly farming is a key. The key instrument to implement pollinator-friendly farming is definitely the common agriculture policy, as agricultural landscapes are critical for the conservation of pollinators, and the number of pressures straighten bees and wild pollinators in agriculture areas. We need to highlight that not only landscape homogenization and chemical input threaten pollinators, but also farmland abandonment. The wide range of common agriculture policy measures to support pollinator conservation has great potential to tackle the pressures more effectively and create a pollinator-friendly agricultural landscape. But as the special report of the European Court of Auditors, Protection of Wild Pollinators in the EU Commission initiatives have not borne fruit, show that there is still room for improvement in the effectiveness of the CAP measures. At this point, when member states across the EU are developing their strategic plans, it is important to integrate pollinators' needs in the CAP strategic plans and implemented measures to tackle the drivers of decline. There are many options to integrate their protection into CAP strategic plans for 2023 to 2027. We need to tackle the pressures with the help of our green architecture instruments, conditionally eco-schemes and Pillar 2 interventions, especially agri-environment and climate measures. The result should be a coherent package of intervention measures in both pillars of the CAP. The CAP strategical plan should support the appropriate management of existing farmland habitats for pollinators, the creation of habitats for pollinators, the insurance of diversity and abundance of flowering plants, the creation of extra pollinator researches, of the implementation of system to reduce pesticides and fertilizer use. To maximize the benefits for pollinators, we need to take a landscape scale approach to plan and position wild pollinators habitats. The following habitats can be restored or created: species rich grasslands, field margins, buffer and flowering strips, landscapes features, follow fields where wildflowers grow, heat and scrub and wooded land. Pollinators need a variety of different plants for food, shelter, hibernating, and breeding sites throughout their entire life cycle. On farmland, insufficient plant diversity often means pollinators do not have enough resources outside the short time frame when crops bloom. Slovenia plans to use a different CAP instruments in the strategic plan to address the decline of pollinators. As one of the identified needs, it is maintaining the pollination ecosystem service by improving the habitat of wild pollinators. We plan to address this need with different intervention. Result-based intervention, color flower meadow, and intervention conservation of semi-natural habitats and landscape features as ecoschemes, special grassland habitats as butterflies, as agri-environmental schemes, investment in the purchase of agriculture machinery and equipment for grassland habitat management, and non-productive investment in the arrangement of hedgerows, tri-stone walls, and other landscape features. However, the common agriculture policy alone will non-stop the decline of pollinators. Other policies such as biodiversity, cohesion, researches, and innovation need to play an active role in the matter. The different policies and instruments need to be coherent in the complementary, and it is upon all of us, policymakers, private sector, NGOs, academia, to work together as one to ensure the sustainable future for the pollinators and consequently for the EU agri-food system as well. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude by wishing you a successful and fruitful discussion during this Pollinator Week. I am convinced that events like this are for a great importance and raise awareness and strengthen our common efforts to change things for better for the pollinators and the future of agri-food systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, State Secretary Irgolic, for your very important and relevant keynote presentation. Thank you for elaborating how the Republic of Slovenia is dealing with this important subject in the context of the implementation of the Common Agricultural Policy, but also in the context of other instruments, as you have mentioned. Thank you very, very much. We will now continue with our third keynote speaker. And here I'm honored to announce that Mr. Franz Begovic, member of the European Parliament, will be our third keynote speaker. Mr. Begovic is a member of the European Parliament and the group of the European People's Party. He is very active on the topic of pollinators. He comes from Slovenia, where pollinators are high on the political agenda, as we have just heard from State Secretary Irgolic. So, Mr. Begovic, you have the floor. We are honored that you are here.
Good morning. First, allow me a little correction. My name is Franz Bogovic.
I'm sorry for that. Yeah, I recognize.
No problem.
Sorry for that.
I'm member of the European Parliament from Slovenia. So, dear Commissioner, dear State Secretary, dear experts and other participants, as always, it's my great honor to participate in the EU Pollinator Week. previously known as European Bee Week, even though this year all the discussions are taking place only online. I'm happy to co-host today's discussion, which will try to present how the EU policy, particularly the CAP, can help protecting pollinators and promote pollinator conservation in agricultural land. Mr. Commissioner and Mr. State Secretary already presented the brief overview of EU policies and measures, which are targeting the challenges of biodiversity loss, nature conservation, and pollinators protection. As all know, our food production is crucially dependent on insect pollination. In the EU, 78% of native flora and 84% of crops are either partially or fully dependent on insect for pollination. Even though we have one of the highest standards for biodiversity protection in the world, significant pollinator loss has been documented over time across the EU. Therefore, pollinator protection is one of the key issues of the European Parliament and has been for years. In the recent resolution on EU biodiversity strategy for 2030, we are calling for the urgent revision of the Pollinators Initiative, which should include a new EU-wide pollinator monitoring framework with robust measures, clear time-bound objectives and indicators, including impact indicators and necessary capacity building. We also called on the Commission and the Member States to ensure that the revision on the EFSA bee guidance document should also cover wild pollinator and, among other things, highlighted the importance of high diversity landscape features in agriculture areas, which can significantly contribute to biodiversity and pollinators protection and restoration. In my opinion, we also managed to secure a reasonable set of interventions for supporting pollinators conservation and protecting biodiversity in recently adopted CAP reform. Member States now have the tools to prepare their national CAP strategic plans in the direction of protecting pollinators through conditionality and the coherent package of intervention measures in both pillars of CAP. Enhanced eco schemes and agri-environmental schemes are the right tools to reach this objective, as well as the objective of the EU biodiversity strategy. However, farmers who will be on the front lines of this transition need to be sufficiently compensated for their efforts. When speaking of pollinators, we mostly think about honeybees, which are an indispensable element in the pollination process. Thanks to Slovenian beekeepers and the efforts of our government, we are even celebrating 20th May as World Bee Day each year in order to remember on the importance of bees for food production, as well as to reflect on our impact biodiversity loss, which is alarming in many parts of Europe and the world. However, we should not forget wild pollinators, which are also dangerously declining. The Commission is indeed supporting several actions for better wild pollinator protection, such as EU Pollinators Information Hive, combating invasive alien species, or EU Ecolab as one of the tools that can mitigate the negative impacts of consumers' choices on biodiversity. The EU Pollinators Initiative is a useful tool in tackling the decline of all pollinators, but efforts we need to step up, particularly in address to loss of habitats in farming landscape and the impacts of pesticides. Dear all, I would like to thank you for taking part in today's morning session, which serves as general introduction in the expert session later on. We are all here because we want to protect our world and our nature for our future generation. Let's start with action that will shape pollinators-friendly agriculture in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, MEP Franz Bogovic, and my sincere apologies once again for mispronouncing your name. Thank you very much for this highly relevant keynote address which you gave to us. Thanks for reminding us of the importance of wild pollinators in this context. And I'm happy to announce that Mr. Bogovic will host a wrap-up session at 4:30 this afternoon. I've been informed that this will be the case. And this wrap-up session at 4:30 this afternoon, which will present the highlights of the day, including from this workshop. So I highly invite all of you interested in this to join our host, Mr. Bogovic, for this wrap-up session later today. I think it will be worth with it. And the details how to join this session can be found in the program of the EU Pollinator Week. So thank you once again. Thanks to all three high-level speakers in this open session for your keynote presentations, which is very much appreciated, which sets the scene, which paves the way for the subsequent steps during this workshop and during this day. With that, we move to the next part of this workshop, which will be expert input statements from various stakeholders interested in pollinators, working with pollinators, having a stake at the topic of in the topic of pollinators. It will be 4 expert input statements from 4 colleagues from 4 different organizations. Each of them has maximum 7 minutes for this input statement. I will kindly ask all the presenters to stick to this timing so that we can have a smooth functioning of the workshop and also have some time for question and answers after these 4 presentations. And it is now my pleasure to invite the first of our experts, of our stakeholders, to take the floor. That will be Mrs. Alessandra Giacomelli from BeeLife. Dr. Alessandra Giacomelli will speak on behalf of BeeLife, the European Beekeeping Coordination, an association formed by professionals of the beekeeping sector across the European Union for the protection of bees and pollinators. Dr. Giacomelli, Alessandra, you have the floor. We are looking forward to your 7 minutes input statement. Please go ahead.
And thank you. And an NGO majors better environment and our future that we see for agriculture that suitable. And before the nations that come from and 2 more countries are leaders that are leaders need as we need arts and take and be taken by nectar, pollen, but this topic needs to be in diversity, in quality, and also they shall be continuously present in the environment. And they shall also present low pollutants concentration. So another pollinator requirement is the access to uncontaminated water. It shall be free from pesticides and from veterinary products that can be given to animal husbandry. I would have a look to a really important BeeLife principle. We believe in the human dimension of agriculture. If we want to change agriculture, we first need to change our interests and our mindset. Now, the first slide about EcoScheme. We all know that the EcoScheme is a new and innovative system that is present in the CAP. It is voluntary till now to join, and its aim is to increase the national environmental and climate care actions that should be based on local needs. So we propose a package of practices, pollinators friendly, and they are the eligibility criteria for a farmer to benefit from the pollinator eco-schemes. It in 2 points, so the resources quantity, the resources quality, and the human dimension. There is a double choice regarding the resources quantity. We are asking for 1 or more crops interesting to pollinator that shall be on more than 10% of the agricultural service. But the farmer need also to choose different varieties, and we say minimum 3 different varieties that can provide surely pollen and or nectar to pollinators. We are requesting multiple landscape features on more than 7% of the agricultural surface. But I want to clarify that these previous measures can really create a better environmental for pollinator. But if we don't associate it with a reduction of pesticide use, this will be converted in pollinator traps. And that's why we're asking for not preventive use of pesticide if there is the need to use pesticides, to use just not persistent ones, and to apply pesticides only after sunset when the pollinators' flight activities are really reduced. Talking about the human dimension, we're asking for a continuous education, and farmers shall have 10 hours per year on beneficial insects, such as that can control pests or pollinators, and so they can enhance pollination. And also we're asking for a one-to-one engagement, so farmer and beekeepers or farmer and naturalist. We have also included an optional measure that shall be interesting for countries that has not imposed the 4 to 7 year crop rotation. And we're asking that farmers who will implement this measure shall be rewarded. So, as a concrete example of a national negotiation, I'll talk now about our experience in Italy. I'm part of the UNAPI, that is the Italian National Beekeepers Association, and we are a member and co-founder of the Beeline. Beeline and UNAPI was inspired by the European level, and we created an Italian pollinator eco scheme versions. Since 2020, we proposed a national agreement to discuss problems detected by beekeepers and arisen in the agricultural world. And I would like to underline that we worked cheek to cheek, but with mask on, jointly with a very relevant part of the Agricultural Farmers Association. And for months, we investigated to understand the applicability of these measures. And we have modified them in negotiation with the Farming Association. They listened to the pollinator streets, and we understood their field needs. Meanwhile, we also have got in contact with more than 20 environmental NGOs, and we shared our proposal with them, and they created new eco schemes for pollinators with slightly similar ideas, but they were really much more restrictive measures. Finally, in September 2021, the Italian Agriculture and the Health Ministry set a consultation table for all the stakeholders, and they proposed 7 eco schemes, but just one that was focused on pollinators. We brought in that consultation table our proposal that we had till the last minute mediated with the Farmers Association. And these are our eco scheme proposal, Be Friendly. So talking regarding resources quantity, we're asking 1 or more crops interesting to pollinator in at least 10% but of the usable agricultural surface that can be different from the total agricultural surface. And we're asking as mandatory that these crops shall complete all the flowering cycle to grant longer foraging period for pollinators. Asking for crop rotation more than 5 years, and it has to include catch crops, choosing for melliniferous and polliniferous species, green manure, and regarding landscape features, still at least 7% of the usable agricultural surface. Regarding pesticides, we're asking to apply pesticide just with half-life lower than 15 days. And if there is the need of using tansids, they shall present all the active substances approved for organic farming. Now,
Mrs. Giacomelli, could you try to conclude in the next minute? You have already extended a bit beyond the 7 minutes. Thank you very much.
I'll do it. You remember the pesticide measure of applying after sunset and the farmer education. The Agriculture Ministry stated that they shall be included in other agricultural policies, such as the National Action Plans for Sustainable Use of Pesticides. We have a monitoring control system. We are asking them to use the well-known Sentinel and geotagging of video or pics. And I would just like to conclude saying that with these eco schemes, we want to trigger human change. And if we provoke human change, the rest will come. And attention.
Thank you very much, Alessandra Giacomelli, for this very interesting presentation from the perspective of Italian UNAPI and European BeeLife. Sorry for interrupting. I was just trying to make sure that we stick to our timing, and you did very well. Thank you very much. Extremely interesting, extremely relevant for the purpose of our workshop. We now move to the next expert input statement. This will be from Copa Cogeca, Mr. Etienne Bruno. Will give this presentation. He is an agricultural engineer, founder and managing director of CARI, which is the Belgian Beekeeping Center for Research and Information. He is the chairman of the working party Honey at Copa Cogeca, the European Association of Farmers and Agri-Cooperatives, as you may know, and also the chair of the Scientific Commission on Beekeeping Technology and Quality of Apimondia. Etienne Bruno, you have the floor. We are looking forward to your maximum 7 minutes. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Dear representative of the Commission, of the European Parliament and of the Slovenian presidency, dear participants, thank you for inviting me and Copa Cogeca this important workshop. We focus on a very dedicated but important discussion, how to make apiculture pollinators friendly. So the first slide, please. Yeah, the mission of Copa, I think that everybody knows, but it's to ensure a viable, innovative, competitive EU agriculture and agri-food sector, guaranteeing food security to 500 million people through to Europe. And the objective is promoting European farmers and agri-cooperative view to influence EU decision-making process and public opinion. So the next. So as you see, COPA is not so new. COPA was created in 1958 and Cogeca in 1959. 59, yes, and the two come together in 1962 to create one of the biggest association at the farming point of view. So bees and pollinator in general play an important role in biodiversity and in European agriculture and horticulture. A large part of food production relies on pollination in order to preserve crop productivity, crop diversity, and ensure quality of production. A lot of good practices developed by farmers and growers in this regard are already in place across the EU. However, we believe European farmers and agro-cooperatives together with the EU and national institutions can improve the state of play. Yes, the next. As we know, farmers and beekeepers work in close collaboration, and this is a key point. Bees and pollinators provide farmers with an essential and fundamental service, pollination. Without a good and proper pollination, the crops and the harvest will not be good. Therefore, with a proper activity, bees and pollinator will ensure healthy crops, taken in consideration moderate climate change, and farmers will be happy about its harvest. So it's a win-win situation there. Therefore, the synergy between the farmers, pollinators, and beekeepers is fundamental to making a genuine progress in promoting pollinator population, and it's up to us to strengthen as much as possible. As we know, in the past, it was a kind of competition between the beekeeper and farmers, but today, all of us, we know that we have to work together hand in hand. The next slide, please. For COPA and Cogeca, the message is clear. Everyone, farmers, growers, beekeepers, local authorities, relevant third parties, etc., has to involve to achieve concrete results. There, the first important thing is the CAP. One of the CAP's objectives under Article 6.f of the Regulation of the CAP Strategy Plan aims to contribute to halting and reversing biodiversity loss, enhance ecosystem service, and preserve habitat and landscape. It's really important to have this base, this legal base. For this reason, and here it's important to understand that it's member states, when developing SWOT analysis and consequently the right measure to meet national needs, that will be able to prepare different interventions in support to pollinators, such as eco-scheme and agri-environmental climate measure. But it's really to the member states to do this work. So it's important that they keep this in their minds. Another point is the support, dialogue, and cooperation. Through existing dialogue and cooperation platform and initiative among farmers and beekeepers, bee issues are addressed while ensuring the preservation of healthy crops and the competitiveness of entire agricultural sector. This is based on some key principles of common understanding, which are jointly supported both by farmers and beekeepers. This is also a key point, because without this kind of communication and understanding who has who, what are the needs of the beekeeper, the farmers, and this in all the different countries with the diversity, I think without this, it's impossible to build really a politics to preserve pollinators. We have a new figure. One element considered to be still crucial, however, is the development and training of proper technician and advisor. This technician advisor must be able to deliver up to date practical knowledge on beekeeping and crop production. For example, information on correct pollination, management of beehives, etc. Another tool is the use of digitalization and satellite technology. An important support to farmers is to use of the latest technology, especially in satellite dimension. Indeed, it is proven that the sight from above can help the farmers to better assess where and when the crop needs further support. In this way, the consumption of plant protection products can be reduced, while at the same time supporting biodiversity and pollinators. Furthermore, in the context of cooperation between farmers and beekeepers, I would like to present you a good initiative already present in the Czech Republic. Next slide, please. The Czech government created a website where farmers can know instantly where beekeepers have placed their beehives. In addition, farmers are obliged to communicate to beekeepers when they are going to spray. This notification system allows to minimize the risk for pollinators, or more or less for the beneficiaries beekeepers and farmers. It's the first step. To wrap up my presentation, pollinators are under threat and the problem is clear. However, there are several tools to improve the negative trends affecting pollinators, and we need further and stronger collaboration between all players. Farmers and beekeepers have to deepen and improve their synergy, but they cannot resolve this problem without a strong support for legislation and institutions. Next slide. So just thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bruno, for this very clear presentation, very important presentation. Thanks to sticking to the time. That is highly appreciated. Thanks for expressing the views from the perspective of Copa Cochega, what farmers can and already do, and in which context this has to be placed. Thanks also for sharing a concrete example. That is always very instructive. Thank you. We now move on to the next speaker in this panel of expert input statements, stakeholder statements. And here I kindly invite Mrs. Mathilde Kalmels to give the next presentation. She's policy coordinator on pesticides, fertilizers, and natural inputs at IFOAM, Organics Europe, which is the European umbrella organization for organic food and farming. And she will give us the views of from the perspective of organic farmers. Mathilde Kalmels, you have the floor, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just sharing my screen. Oh, can you see my presentation?
Yes,
Yes,
very
okay,
well.
thank
Yeah,
you.
we can hear you and see the presentation. Excellent.
Great, thank you. So yes, first thanks to the organizers for showing me the opportunity to present the organic movement's view on how we can best reach a pollinator-friendly agriculture. So before starting, just a quick word about IFOAM Organics Europe. So we represent, we are the European umbrella organization for food and farming in the organic sector. So we represent the entire organic food chain from farmers to retailers and also beyond with researchers, certifiers and input providers. We have almost 200 members in 34 European countries. So now just a few words of introduction to put the political context, because as you know, the Farm to Fork and the biodiversity strategies have set what we see in the organic movement as a smart and reasonable target of reaching 25% of organic land in Europe by 2030. So these two strategies put organic farming at the heart of a transition to a sustainable food system, which is a relevant choice as we know that organic agriculture is ready to deliver on biodiversity challenges because it has proven benefits for farmers and society, and it also provides the ecosystem services needed for reaching EU Farm to Fork and biodiversity targets. And we also know that organic agriculture is ready to welcome new entrants thanks to its well-established and dynamic movement, which is well known by consumers and member states and which is also very well defined and regulated at EU level. So just some key figures about organic farming and its benefits for biodiversity and pollinators. So those benefits are increasingly recognized by public authorities and research. So in the EU Organic Action Plan, we have the statement from the Commission that land farmed organically has about 30% more biodiversity than land farmed conventionally. And in two recent meta-studies on organic agriculture, we know that the number of insect species are higher in organically managed land than in conventional managed land. So to understand the benefits of organic farming for biodiversity, we need to take a look at the organic approach to plant health, which relies on key principles, which is working with biodiversity. So those biodiversity benefits are delivered thanks to the practices that are prohibited under organic regulation, such as the use of synthetic inputs. So this limits the impact of pesticides on pollinators. And on the other hand, organic farmers implement agroecological practices to solve the production issues without external input, and which allow biodiversity enhancement and which also promote pollinators. So first part of the organic approach to plant health is to minimizing the dependence on external inputs. So in organic agriculture, the use of synthetic inputs such as nitrogen fertilizers, synthetic pesticides and the use of herbicides is not allowed. We are only allowed to use natural inputs, and those natural inputs are not needed on grassland and most arable crops. So the use of pesticides of natural origin is very limited to a small part of the organic area, mainly specialty crops. And by completely avoiding the use of most of these synthetic inputs, the benefits of organic farming go significantly beyond those that might be expected from an improvement in input use efficiency with conventional system. So on the other hand, in the organic approach to plant health, we prioritize preventive measures that are implemented through biodiversity enhancing practices. So you have a list of those practices here. So for instance, organic farmers implement diverse and complex crop rotation. They use genetic diversity with resistant varieties to support pest and disease control. And they also establish semi-natural habitats, which offers refuge for beneficial insects. And so here you have an example of flower strips in an organic orchard. So you can see that biodiversity in organic farming is really part of the production strategy and exists within the production area. So what are our policy recommendations to have an agriculture pollinator friendly? So we need to have in the CAP plan, strategic plans, national target for organic land, which represents a fair contribution to the EU 25% target. We also need to have appropriate remuneration for the delivery of public goods by organic farmers. So both through rural development measure or through eco scheme. Then we really need to encourage natural ecological focus areas to create refuges for beneficial insects. And also we need to provide the technical support to organic farmers because it's technically challenging to implement an agriculture friendly organic system that are friendly for pollinators. And just to finish, a few words about a recent study from iFarm Organics Europe, which highlights the potential targets for member states to achieve the 25% target at EU level, and also which allow to visualize the budget that they need to dedicate for organic agriculture in their CAP strategic plans to reach this 25% target. Yeah, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mathilde, for this very clear and very important presentation. Thanks also to stick to the timing. Thanks for providing the perspective of the organic farming sector and what you can provide to protect biodiversity in general and pollinators in particular. Thank you very much. We now move to the next and final presenter in this session, where we hear expert input statements from stakeholders. And now it's the voice of academia, and I'm happy to announce that Professor David Klein will give this short input statement. Professor Klein is the chair in plant ecology and nature conservation at Wageningen University. His research focuses on the effects of agriculture on pollinator communities and the contribution of pollinators to agriculture. Please, we are looking forward to your maximum 7 minutes statement. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. I would like to give the perspective from basically the bees, and I will focus on wild pollinators. And I should say bees and hoverflies and butterflies, because there are more pollinators than bees, of course. It has already been mentioned, agricultural management has a significant impact on pollinators, especially in the fields. And this is illustrated in this graph where we compared bee communities on fields that received no inputs with fields that received high-end inputs. And this was more than 120 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare per year. And you can see that on the no input fields, you have about 3 times as many bee species as on the high input fields. This will not come as a surprise. We know this for grasslands, but probably the same applies to arable fields, where you can see that these extensively managed fields here in the south of Italy host many flowers and food resources, whereas intensively managed arable fields generally don't. However, what is interesting is that pollinators in semi-natural habitats in agricultural landscapes are hardly affected by what is being cultivated in the field. This is illustrated here, a study from Italy, where we compared the number of pollinator species in semi-natural habitats in landscapes that hosted a different range of mass flowering crop species. The range was from 0 to 6, and as you can see, there is no relationship whatsoever between the number of mass flowering crops and the number of pollinator species in semi-natural habitats. This is also confirmed in grassland systems, where we found that pollinators, again, in semi-natural habitats are hardly affected by the intensity of management on neighboring fields. Here you see, as an indicator of management intensity, the grassland cutting frequency, which ranges from 1 time a year, and then you have these really nice flower-rich fields, to 4 times a year, and then you have these monocultural grasslands that don't provide many floral resources. And then if you look at the grasslands themselves, you see the expected decline in species richness. This is a case for rare wild bees, but we did the same thing for bees in general, for hoverflies. However, if you look at field boundaries, then you see no relationship whatsoever. So it seems the semi-natural habitats are key to wild pollinators. They provide the resources they need throughout the whole year. There is one exception where the management on fields impacts on pollinators also in semi-natural habitats, and that of course is the pesticide applications. They can have a significant impact on pollinators in the wider landscape. This is illustrated by this study, in my opinion, one of the best studies that show this, where the scientists compared bee communities in and around fields of oilseed rape, where some of the fields had seeds coated with systemic insecticides, and other fields didn't have the same thing. Otherwise, it was exactly the same, and you can see that wild bee density was about 2 times as high on fields with without the systemic insecticides in the seed coating. Then the big question, of course, is how much semi-natural habitat is needed to sustain pollinator communities in agricultural landscapes. We don't really know this. I think this is a nice attempt to solve this question. It's a study from the Netherlands, and it sort of uses this 7% semi-natural habitat or ecological focus areas that was initially listed in the former CAP reform, in the greening of the current CAP. And it shows that at 7%, you have pretty much left this steepest part of the curve. This is an example for butterflies, but they found similar things for hoverflies as well. So 7% seems to be a reasonable bottom line. More, of course, is always better, but this has to be possible also from the perspective of producing enough agricultural products. So far, we have just talked about semi-natural habitats as if they are all the same. And this, of course, is not the case. So this is what we generally do. We look at the landscape and then we say this is semi-natural habitat and this isn't, and the semi-natural habitat is important for pollinators, and the rest of the landscape is just, unimportant. But when you zoom in on the semi-natural habitats, then they are sort of divided in different types of habitats, such as, in our case, in the Netherlands, field boundaries and hedges and roadside verges and pastures, and of course also these really species-rich grasslands. And we asked ourselves, do these different habitats also support significantly different numbers of wild pollinators? And this study focused on bees. And then the answer obviously is yes. So the Natura 2000 grasslands, in our case, supported by far the highest densities of wild bee species. And the typical hedges that we have in the Netherlands, the really small, regularly mown hedges, they supported the lowest number of bee species. You can't extrapolate these specific findings to the rest of Europe, but it's a good indication that the type of semi-natural habitat is important. We also explored what is the driving factor of these differences in the quality of different habitats. And then we looked at the number of flowering plant species. And this graph shows the number of flowering plant species versus the number of wild bee species that we observed. And then you actually see that if you look at the same level of plant species richness, for example, indicated here by this red arrow, then the differences between the habitats aren't that big. The differences are mainly determined by the number of flowering plant species in the different semi-natural habitats, indicated by this horizontal arrow. And this is actually good news because it means that you can sort of control the quality of the semi-natural habitats by manipulating the flower richness. And this, I'm sad to say, is how a typical field boundary in the Netherlands looks like. And I'm pretty sure that in many other areas in Europe, it looks exactly the same. So this is low quality habitat for pollinators. And if we can change this to these kind of habitats, then I think we can really make a difference for pollinators. So this brings me to my take-home messages. I think semi-natural habitat is key for conserving pollinators in agricultural landscapes. But targeted management is needed to enhance the quality and especially the floral diversity of these semi-natural habitats. We should aim for at least 7% high-quality semi-natural habitats on farmland. And on top of that, we should reduce negative externalities of agricultural activities on habitats in the wider countryside. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you, for Professor Klein, for this very interesting and relevant presentation. Thanks for providing insights into the academic research in this area, which is so important and so relevant. So very important additional input in our expert input statements panel. Thank you very much. And with this, I would like to thank all the 4 presenters in this panel for their very clear presentations, and thanks for excellent time discipline as well, which allows us now to briefly look if there are any questions or comments. We can have a 5 minutes Q&A session if there are any questions. And here I would like to ask my colleague Stefan Schindler, who already appears here on the screen, who is so kind to observe the chat, to follow it, to see if any comments have been raised, and to present it to the respective speaker. So Stefan, have we seen anything in the chat? What are the points raised?
Yes, good morning, everybody. Welcome also from my side. My name is Stefan Schindler from the Environment Agency Austria. Until now, I received here in the chat 2 questions. Both are from our colleague Guy Peer from IDIF with Z, Germany. The first question is for Mathilde Karmels. It's also a comment and question at the same time. So the point is that organic farming is positive for biodiversity and shows sometimes benefits for biodiversity, but also according to a recent review, it's still it could be much better. And also I am aware of several studies that did not find significant benefits for biodiversity due to organic farming. So the question for Matilda would be, what can be done to enhance more than currently the biodiversity benefits of organic farming?
Mathilde?
Yes, thank you for this question. So first, about studies that can find that organic agriculture is not always beneficial for biodiversity. It's mainly related to yield losses in organic agriculture. And we just need to keep in mind that if we think about a new food system, we need to a shift in production, but also in consumption. So today we have 80% of the world land, agricultural land, which is dedicated to animal production. And we know that if we want to move to a sustainable food system, we need to reduce our meat consumption. So, I mean, if there are yield losses in organic agriculture, and so if we need more land, we also need to reallocate land for the productions that we need to feed us. And then just to improve organic agriculture benefits for biodiversity, we also need more public research in resistant varieties, in natural inputs, etc. So I would say that those are the two main elements to consider.
Thank you. Stefan, further questions raised in the chat?
Yes, a second question is dealing with the number of 7% that was mentioned by David Klein. So the issue is here that it always depends also on the quality of these areas, not only on the quantity. And especially when it is on landscape features, and we had the experience with the ecological focus areas, then there might be also a range of other habitats that are there considered. The policy targets and are far below the needs, is here stated in the question, and this places dependency on eco-schemes for expansion. And I also got a second question for David Klein. It says here, if we take biomass and abundance of common pollinators into account, which are relevant for pollination services, would you expand your recommendations, for instance, to measures affecting the cropping systems, for instance, mass flowering? So I would like to ask David, please, to respond to these questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. Yeah, these are good questions, and of course not easy to answer, but to the best of my knowledge, I would say that the 7% is actually the bottom line for healthy pollinator populations. If we combine that, because this is 7% on farmland, right? So on top of that, you have semi-natural habitats that are part of public space. You have nature reserves. If you add that, you end up with a higher proportion of the entire landscape, and then you also have wider variety of habitats that are needed by the different pollinators. So I would say aim for that. I think that's difficult enough, as the past negotiations. The negotiations with respect to the past cap has shown, and then we're in a good place, and then we can build from that. With respect to the second question, if you focus on the pollinators that are really important for the pollination of our crops, the mass flowering crops, you end up with a smaller subset of all the pollinators. And then some of these pollinators will benefit from the presence of mass flowering crops and build larger populations. So I think the situation changes slightly, but only slightly, because these mass flowering crops only provide floral resources for a short period of time. The rest of the year, they are, and for nesting resources, they are fully reliant on semi-natural habitat. Yeah, that's basically it.
Thank you. Of course, I would like, and thanks for the questions and answers. I would like to remind, of course, that in this workshop, we are focusing on the conservation of pollinators and not indirectly on the service, but of course, protecting species will in long term also protect the service. Maybe we have that in mind when we are raising questions and answers and discussing. Time permits for maybe a final question and brief answer, Stefan, if there is any, and then we move on in our program. Stefan?
Yeah, a last question entered. The question says that the question is how to achieve a restoration and protection through eco-schemes, non-productive investments, and ACMs. That's a rather general question. I don't know if someone can answer this from our experts who delivered the input statements.
So it was not addressed to a specific colleague of our presenters. Does anyone would like to answer, or maybe we keep it for a later discussion? Any of our presenters willing to come in at this stage? Because if not, and as it was not addressed specifically to a certain colleague. Oh, Etienne, please go ahead.
Just, it's I know that nearly nobody can answer to this question because it's so broad. And what I just want to tell, it's this kind of solution can only be found at a local level. With a discussion between the farmers, all the partners, all the persons involved in this kind of situation to kind of find a common situation and a global situation. We have the technology, we have the knowledge, and when we put all together in the specific context, there we can find some solution. But it's together that we can work, and it's why it's not one person who can give the answer, I think. It's just a comment.
Thank you, Etienne, for jumping in and at least putting the issue into perspective and clarifying that it is indeed a broad, relevant but a broad question, and it will keep us busy, of course. Now, thank you, Stefan, for observing the chat and kindly raising the points and giving it to our presenters. Thanks for the answers so far. I think it's time now to move on to the final part of our opening session this morning. And this will be now a session where we will hear 3 input statements by representatives of member states. Each of them also has a maximum 7 minutes for the presentation. I kindly ask all 3 presenters also to stick to this timing. And the first one will be an input statement by Mrs. Elisabeth Süssenbacher. She is from the Federal Ministry of Agriculture, Regions and Tourism in Austria. She is working there as a biodiversity expert at this ministry in the division of agri-environment, mountain farmers, less favored areas and organic farming. So Elisabeth, you have the floor. 7 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I'm very pleased to be here to share our experiences on conservation schemes for pollinators today. Yeah, let's come into topic. Next slide, please. When it comes to agrobiodiversity or to pollinators, Austria is facing 2 opposing developments. We have, on the one hand, agricultural land in lowland areas or in favorable agricultural areas is getting limited, and it's more and more intensified. And on the other hand, we have low productive areas, especially in the mountain regions, which are at high risk for abandonment. And both of these developments lead to a decline in biodiversity and also in pollinators. Next slide, please. And with the help of our agri-environment program, we want to counteract these developments. We have a really high participation rate. About 80% of all our farmers and of the agricultural area in Austria is participating. And next to biodiversity, there are also other environmental aims like climate protection, water protection, soil and animal welfare. But we have also a lot of measures dealing with biodiversity. Next slide, please. And of course, the environmental effect of the agri-environment program is evaluated on a regular basis. And we also have to monitor like the farmland bird index or other biodiversity indexes. And on this slide, you see the development of the farmland bird index. And as an important food source of farmland birds are insects or pollinators, this is directly linked also to pollinators. And you see we have a decline of about 40% in the last 2 decades. But we also see there is stabilization of the index in the last programming period of the CAP. So according to BirdLife, the measures of the current agri-environment program might be a reason for this stabilization, because we increased the obligation to create biodiversity areas. We have an entry condition of the agri-environment program that the farmers have to create at least 5% biodiversity areas on arable land and 5% on grassland. Next slide, please. And there on this slide, you see the development of the land-lying fallow on arable land. And you see with the abolition of the set-aside obligation in 2007, the land-lying fallow more than halved. And within the current programming period from 2015 onwards, increased again, and in the future CAP we want to increase this even more than now. Next slide, please. Precisely, we are planning that there's this Green Deal target, or the target of the biodiversity strategy, that at least 10% of the agricultural area should be provided as high diversity landscape features, and we are aiming to fulfill this target. These high diversity landscape features are represented by fallow land, landscape elements, typical landscape elements like trees and hedges, but also areas with maintenance requirements that have a strong impact on biodiversity. And in Austria, for Austria, this means that we have to create 220,000 hectares of so-called landscape elements. And we want to reach this by biodiversity areas as an entry condition in the agri-environment program and as an obligation for organic farmers. So they have to create at least 7% of their arable land and grasslands as biodiversity areas. We also want to count nature conservation areas. Then GAIAC 8 also helps us to achieve this target because farmers have to set aside 4% of their arable land if they have more than 10 hectares of arable land. Yeah, then the traditional landscape elements we want to count to this target, and the mowed mountain grassland. Next slide, please. Here on this picture you see a biodiversity area on arable land. So we want to increase this minimum percentage to up to 7%. But we also developed this management option qualitatively. There will be on arable land an improved species composition. So at least they have to consist of at least 5 different plant species which are insect pollinated. And these plant species have to come from 3 different families. And there also, it will be possible that there are prolonged management-free time periods. The farmer will not mow it every year, but he can do this every 2nd year. And yeah, overall, we will have a strong focus on training, advisory, and awareness raising, because we want farmers to understand also the benefits of biodiversity, and we want them to understand the environmental effects of the management options they are implementing on the field. And of course, also the renouncement of pesticides and restrictions of fertilizers, which are important for insect populations and for pollinators, we are implementing in the agri-environment program and in the organic farming measure. Next slide, please. And what are we doing for pollinators on grassland? This is my last slide, is that we also have want to promote the structural diversity in a horizontal approach. Therefore, we have the obligation to create biodiversity areas as we do have this on arable land. We are promoting traditional grassland farming. We are preserving landscape elements, including orchards. And of course, we are going to promote, like in the current programming period, the site-specific management of ecologically very valuable meadows and pastures, like wetland meadows, dry grasslands, or very species-rich hay meadows. We have a nature conservation measure within the agri-environment program. And we also want to further implement result-based approaches in terms of nature conservation with a strong focus on advisory and training. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Elisabeth Süßenbacher, for providing these insights into what Austria has in mind to do in the implementation of the CAP from 2023 onwards. Thanks for this Austrian perspective. We now move to Ireland, and here I'm happy to invite Mr. Neal Ryan, who is an agriculture inspector in the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine in Ireland, which he joined in 2001 after 8 years working in both the private and public sectors. Since 2019, his main responsibilities include biodiversity policy. So, Niall, you have the floor. Please go ahead. Please unmute yourself. We cannot hear you yet. And if you have a presentation, then please also share it with us.
Sorry, my apologies there now. Can you hear? You can hear me now. So my apologies.
Yeah, we can hear you now. It's good.
So look, I suppose I just want to talk a little bit about pollinators in Ireland and what we're doing with our CAP strategic plan. But just as a background, I just want to give a small bit of information on our country. We are quite small with 6.9 million hectares and approximately 4.5 million hectares of this is utilisable agricultural area. So around 65% of our country is farmed. We have an average farm size of 32.4 hectares, 137,000 farmers, and our landscape is predominantly a grassland landscape. We have 92% of our farmland in grassland, and we have only a very small percentage of our farmed area in tillage. So that's just a bit of a background on our country. I suppose in relation to the pollinators in Ireland, this pie chart would really show that the majority of our pollinators in Ireland come from bees, and then we have after that then hoverflies, butterflies, moths and other insects. And I suppose just focusing in a little bit more, Ireland, we only have 99 bee species and we have 180 species of hoverflies. And I suppose we're over in the western side of Europe. We're a bit unlike, I suppose, other colleagues in the EU who would have much higher levels of bees. We would have quite low numbers. So, and 1/3 of our wild bees are deemed to be threatened with extinction. So Ireland has its own, I suppose, pollinator initiative since around 2015, and we have, it's called the All Ireland Pollinator Plan, and it was developed by a 16-member steering group back in September 2015, and this is led by our National Biodiversity Data Centre and Trinity College. And this plan had a framework. It's really a framework where all sectors would come together and to protect habitats for future generations. It's implemented and coordinated by our National Biodiversity Data Centre. Our National Biodiversity Data Centre is involved in the collection, collation, management, analysis and dissemination of all data related to Ireland's biodiversity. The plan had 5 objectives, it had 81 different actions, and it had a section for farmland actions. And our Department of Agriculture were on the steering group and were involved in the farmland actions for pollinators. We now have that plan has been updated and has been launched in March this year. And I suppose we've reviewed the last plan, and we have 6 objectives this time. One involves farmland again. It has 186 different actions this time around. Again, it's been the implementation and the coordination is by the National Biodiversity Data Centre. And in relation to the farmland side of it, our Department of Agriculture is funding a farmland pollinator officer who will help implement the actions in the farmland pollinator objective, and will disseminate those and work with industry in Ireland, all agribusinesses and industry, and all the various stakeholders involved in agriculture. Something new else that we've launched this year is a pilot national pollinator monitoring scheme. It was launched, I suppose, in July this year. It's funded by 2 government departments, ourselves and the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage, which is our National Parks and Wildlife Service. Again, this will be implemented and coordinated by our National Biodiversity Data Centre. It's going to focus on wild pollinators, bees, hoverflies. We'll probably do some butterflies and possibly moths as well. We're going to have 50 sites around the country, which includes farmland. And it's going to follow the methodology in the draft EU Pollinator initiatives. And I would like to thank colleagues there in DG Environment. We've met them on a number of occasions to discuss this in relation to the EU Pollinator Monitoring Scheme. And we hope that then this pollinator monitoring will help us inform future policy and CAP decisions. At this point in time, we have the National Biodiversity Data Centre has recruited a staff member to lead this project, and we hope to roll it out starting next year. I suppose switching back to our CAP, our current CAP, I suppose just briefly, we have obviously in the Pillar 1 side, we have our cross compliance with our SMRs and our GEC requirements, and Ireland under GEC 7 had landscape features, hedgerows and buffers, drains as landscape features. On our Pillar 2 side, our agri-environment climate measure, GLAS, it's our current measure, has a number of actions that also benefit pollinators, such as in the Stura sites, grass. We have a number of grassland actions that involve low inputs into them, and we have the prescription-based actions. We have also a number of fallow land, wild bird cover for winter feed butter, and just to give an example of a few, we also have an organic farming scheme under our Pillar 2 currently, and we're quite low in terms of a European scale in organics. I think we're the lowest in Europe at less than 2% of our land in organic farming, with around 1,700 organic farmers. We also have our Burren program, which is a habitat management and biodiversity conservation program. And then we have a number of European innovation partnerships, and a number of those are involved in habitat management as well, and that would help with pollinators. And then we have a number of specific pollinators in our European innovation partnerships. We have the Protecting Farmland Pollinators, and then we have a farmer moth monitoring project and the Great Yellow Bumblebee. I suppose just in relation to the Protecting Farmland Pollinators, this is a pilot project, obviously testing pollinator measures on farms to see how we could get farmers more pollinator friendly. There's 40 farmers involved in it. They're a mixed farming practice. They have either dairy, beef, tillage, or a mixture of both. And farms were selected on various, I suppose, both quality of habitat and quantity of habitat. And this measure has a results-based payment for based on how pollinator friendly the farm is. So if it's more pollinator friendly, well, then it attracts higher payment. I suppose the project is to run to 2023, but however, I suppose some results coming back from it are showing that hedgerows are showing to be very, very important for pollinators, and non-farmed areas very, very important as well. And farmers are very engaged with the project as well.
Okay, can you try to conclude in the next minute
so,
maximum?
Yeah, sorry, Dan.
Please.
This year, we just had 2 more calls. A farmer moth monitoring project and our Great Yellow Bumblebee project. The Great Yellow Bumblebee is Ireland's rarest bumblebee, and we're looking at defining results based around that. I suppose just going forward then, I suppose our SWOT, we identified in our SWOT analysis, I suppose just a few points taken out. We have a strong policy framework, we have weaknesses, we have opportunities, and we have threats. And then I suppose going forward, what we're proposing in Pillar 1 is we're going to redefine the eligible hectare, and we hope that we would include up to 30% ineligible features in our eligible hectare, provided that they will be beneficial for climate and biodiversity and water quality. In relation to conditionality, this was touched on already with earlier speakers. GAC 9 is only applicable to tillage land. Ireland because we have a very, very low amount of tillage land that I've said already. We're going to make GEC 9 applicable to all farms in Ireland. And then on our eco schemes, we're going to build on GEC 9, and we're going to hopefully to increase the non-productive areas up to a minimum of 7%. We're also looking at some planting of native trees and some extensive farming systems. And we also, under Pillar 1 size, will have an apiculture program. I suppose just...
Okay. Please conclude. We are running.
Yes, sorry, Dan. Look, in relation to our Pillar 2, Dan, I'm just nearly there. We're going to have our AECMs again. We will continue to build on where we currently have. We're going to look at bringing in some more operational groups to look at habitats. We will have VIPs, and we're going to also have an organic farming scheme, which would be more ambitious. And look at, I suppose I leave you with some pictures of pollinators I've taken. I also do for my own farm. So I just want to say thank you very much, and sorry for running over time, Chairman.
Thank you very much for this excellent presentation. Thanks for sharing also these nice pictures at the end. Very important. Thanks for providing the Irish perspective and describing what you have been doing and will do in your country. Now we move to the third and final presentation from a member state's perspective, and this will be done from the perspective of the Netherlands. I invite Mr. Art Mulders from the Ministry of Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality in the Netherlands to give his 7 minutes presentation maximum. He is National Coordinator for the Green Architecture of the CAP Strategic Plan at the Dutch Ministry of Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality. Before that, he was working at the Nature Department, coordinating the Dutch agri-environment climate measures. So, Mr. Mulders, you have the floor. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I try to share my presentation. My name is Art Mulders. Basically, I'm going to tell more or less the same story as Liam. Pollinators is a part of many policies within the future CAP. Actually, in the Netherlands, we started with this photo when we started to design the CAP called Be Prepared, where you see the different parts that are important when you want to support pollinators. On the one hand, you have the sustainable farm landscape, more herb-rich grasslands, more trees, wooden elements, but also knowledge. On the other hand, you have the city and the farm landscape as a connection, but it has to be also controllable. How do you control it? This is a measure you can roll out in the whole of the Netherlands. So how do you make it easy in control and justification of the payment? And in the middle is the farmer and his husband and her husband. It has to do with the fact that you have to convince the farmer that it's a good thing he's doing. How do you support that? And for that, you don't need policies from the CAP, but you also need the market. You also need NGOs, support from other parts of society. And that is, the CAP is only a part of it, and that is what you want to build. What was our starting point? Now, first, perhaps the European Biodiversity Strategy and the EU Pollinators Initiative. And furthermore, in the CAP, in our SWOT, it showed that we have a very low biodiversity on farmland. So we have a large take-up to do. In the Netherlands, we also have a Dutch bee strategy. It's called Bed and Breakfast for Bees. And when you see there, what you need is more or less more fields with domestic flowers, plants, shrubs, hedgerows, sandy strips, sustainable pest management, but also strengthen the knowledge dissemination. That you want to build within one area-related CAP, being the conditionalities, the eco schemes, and the AECM in the Netherlands, and that you have to support with investments, knowledge, skills, cooperation. In the Netherlands, the CAP is mostly focused on farm landscape, so we don't look really into the Natura 2000 areas, which are paid nationally. This is then what you have. We have a large first pillar. Our first pillar is approximately 90% of all the EU money. So for us, the eco schemes are very important. It gives us space to implement new environmental measures on a way which looks like the AECM. It is different in the AECM because in the AECM in the Netherlands we have a collective approach. Furthermore, these pollinators have the advantage that you can do that in the whole of the country, while, for example, birds, that kind of things, it's more regionally. What can you then do within the conditionality? One of the first things we did in the Netherlands, which wasn't the case, and in many other countries this was the case, is that we now go and include wooden elements and dishes within the LPIS system, the partial identification system, which makes it also possible to put them into the eco schemes. One discussion we have a lot of in the Netherlands is conditionality is the basis for income support, but it's also the baseline for eco schemes at AECM. There is a lot of discussion in the Netherlands due to the high intensity of the farming, that when you make the conditionality too high, farmers will drop out, and that is especially on the buffer strips along waterways and non-productive areas. But when they do that, you don't only lose them for the basic income support, you also lose them for the eco schemes and the AECM. So how do you then design something that you take in most of the farmers, but still keep space to support them in an something extra within the eco schemes or the AECM? That's a large discussion. It has mostly to do with the non-productive area. 4% is a lot in the Netherlands, non-productive area, and what we want is either 4% or 7% in the eco schemes. And the other thing is the strips, the buffer strips, 3-meter buffer strips in the Netherlands with our amount of ditches is quite a lot sometimes. The main intervention for us is the eco schemes. Basically, the eco schemes are designed as a rating system supporting basic sustainable performance. It's an integrated approach with climate, natural resource, biodiversity and landscape. And in that, we want to build more from what we are now, mostly the lowest level in the picture on the side towards the middle and perhaps even in some areas to the highest level. But it's flexible and broadly accessible by farmers. That means that the farmer can choose what to do. He has to choose within a certain amount of biodiversity measures, but he can choose. And when you then want to accomplish your goals, you have to support it with knowledge and with small investments. These are the measures more or less we want to put in the eco schemes, and then you see especially the various grasslands, the landscape elements, wooden elements, flowers and arbor borders, small scale partials and nature-friendly ditches. They help pollinators. And then also the permanent green cover helps. Actually, what we want to grow through is a system. Liam explained a bit very fast in his EIP ideas that in the end, you want to build a system where you go to a farm, you give him a rating for the combination of elements he has. That, however, is not just now possible. It has to do with justification and that kind of thing. So for this, we start with these kind of elements. Other inventions that we have is our collective approach for the AECM, which is mostly for birds and climate and water measures. Of course, it is something that also helps pollinators, especially the birds' activities. One other thing is the cooperation and small investments. To align conditionality, we want to put a lot of money in the EIP to support farmers both by knowledge and by small investments so that they can develop more easy the habitats we need for the bees and for the other types of pollinators, but also to make the step to give them the knowledge what to do. And that is different. It is locally different what kind of pollinators there are and what measures you need. So you can't steer from, with the eco scheme, you can't steer the farmers all over the country. So you need something to back it up. And it also has to do with the fact that we have in the AECM and the eco schemes almost most of them are the same kind of measures. So you also have to go to the farmers and discuss with them what is best to do for them in that area. And furthermore, we want to start large EIP projects on pest management.
Art, please conclude in the next minute, if possible. Thank you.
Yeah, in the next second. The last thing is farm advice. We want to make it possible for every farmer to make a sustainable farming advice. That was my presentation.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much, and sorry for interrupting. I was just checking the timing and saw that it's nearly about the time when we want to conclude this workshop. Thank you very much, Art, for a very clear and very important presentation. Thanks for providing the Dutch perspective and showing what you have been doing and plan to do in this context. Dear colleagues, we are nearly at the end of our workshop. We should finish more or less in time, but I would like again to see if there are maybe one, maximum two short clarifying questions raised to our three speakers. Stefan, you have been observing the chat. Please pick one or two questions addressed to speakers, and we'll try to get answers and then conclude. Stefan.
Yes, one question is about evaluation and trust building. It says, how do member states plan to gather data to evaluate the efficiency of their measures and to build up public trust in the system? So this question, I think, is a question that each of the three speakers from the member states could answer or give their view on it.
Maybe one of them can do, because if we take all three, it may take a little too much time, but if it can be done very shortly, yes. So who would like? Elizabeth, Niall, Art? Any response to this question?
I can answer. The one thing, of course, you need your policy monitoring, which is more all over the country. I think it's also important, which we also put into the cooperation measure, that farmers can monitor themselves, so that they also can learn the effects of the measures they have. And in that way, you build not only public trust, but you build also up onto that farmers like to do the things they do.
Okay.
Thank you. Also, Niall mentioned such monitorings together with the farmers, but I come now to the next question. It relates to Ireland, Niall, and it is about the discourse with farmers. The question is that the large challenges in Ireland seem to be the hyper-intensive management of grasslands and loss of semi-natural habitats, combined with a pro-intensive farming narrative. So you presented some initiatives where farmers are included, and the question is whether your work with the farmers is helping to steer a change in discourse.
Yes, I suppose in Ireland, I suppose since the abolition of milk quotas, we have certainly seen an increase in dairy farming and an increase in farming intensities in those areas. I suppose we currently have a review of our nitrates program underway, and we're looking at, I suppose, implementing a number of measures there that are compulsory for certain farmers. As we know, AECMs are voluntary, and sometimes intensive farmers don't come into AECMs, but in our last AECM, we tried our best to incentivize intensive farmers. We give them priority access. We will do so again in going forward to try to get intensive farmers to engage in our AECMs. And I suppose in terms of our grasslands, going forward in our AECMs, we're looking at bringing in more multi-species lays for farmers, for intensive farmers that may be renewing their pastures, that if they put in multi-species lays, they will be more pollinator friendly going forward. So look, we have a number of measures that we're considering that will target those intensive farmers.
Okay, dear colleagues, I know there may be one or two more questions, but time is progressing and we have to conclude this workshop. So once again, thank you, Stefan, for observing the chat. Thank you for the brief questions and answers. And in closing this workshop, I really would like, first of all, to thank all speakers for joining us this morning and contributing invaluably with your interventions and presentations. Especially, I would like to thank our high-level speakers, Commissioner Wojciechowski, State Secretary Irgulic, MEP Bogovic, for taking your time to address this important topic. I would also like to thank all the participants for tuning in and contributing to the discussion with their question. Apologies if we could not take all of your questions, but it was very much appreciated that you tuned in. We had, if I observed correctly, all the time more than 100 participants. For all those who would have liked to share your views and proposals, but you were not able to intervene during the session, and you will also not be able to participate in the subsequent expert part, please note that the European Commission will launch an open public consultation in the coming months. Thus, you will have a chance to have your say on this topic. This will be a very good opportunity. We invite all participants, as I've mentioned before, to join the wrap-up session at 4:30 this afternoon, hosted by MEP Franz Bogovic, which will provide reflections and impressions from the whole workshop. As I mentioned, the details how you can find participate in this wrap-up session can be found in the program of the Pollinator Week. Those who are now from 11 a.m. onwards participating in the expert workshop by invitation only, please use the respective link provided in the invitation to this workshop and also sent to you just recently in the reminder. From my side, thank you very much. It was a pleasure and an honor to moderate this workshop. Thanks for all your interest, and let's keep on working in protecting and further developing pollinators in the context of all the broad policies which we have for the future in the European Union and also globally. Thank you very much for your interest. The workshop is now closed, and some of you I will see in a couple of minutes in the expert workshop following at 11 a.m. Thank you very much and goodbye. Have a nice day.